The point is just that I think the more that you do these kinds of exercises, the more you'll approach the problems in your business through a different perspective too. All right, so I'd like for you to go to this maze, and I would like for you to follow with your eye and see if you can get through it in 20 seconds or fewer. That's the path that most people take. That is the fastest path that you can take using no additional assumptions. But did anybody think about going that way? Right? Now, and I think that's important because when we're looking at things, we say, well, what are the rules? And what are our assumptions about the rules of how we're going to grow or how we're going to solve any problem that we face? And if we say, well, every time that we've seen someone else, every time we've looked in a solution book for mazes, we've always seen this, and we've never seen this, then we're not likely to think this way, right? But the other thing that we're not thinking about is this truly the dimensions that we have to work with this? Is it a two-dimensional maze, or is it a three-dimensional maze so that we can just go over the top of everything and get from the first part to the second part? Right? Because if it is, that's the fastest path. And so I just want you to think about that. I think it's important to have an idea when you're looking at your business. All of these people who you see, from Jobs to Elon Musk, and who are innovating, are doing it by what they call first principles thinking, which we'll talk about in a minute. The point is just that I think the more that you do these kinds of exercises, the more you'll approach the problems in your business through a different perspective too. Because it's the frickin' assumptions that kill us. It really is, that stop us from growing the fastest. So what are the preconceptions about your life or business that are currently holding you back? What are the factual assumptions that might not be actual facts? And then what are the language patterns that you're using as you're framing your solutions that might lead you to make assumptions that aren't correct? And last but not least, take all your growth questions and any other, like throughput, manufacturing, anything that you've got, distribution, acquisition or sale, and frame them in terms of ideal outcome and constraint. These are 6 guys that are reasonably successful. Richard Feynman, who's one of the most famous physicists, who you should definitely read if you haven't, and it's Copernicus, Elon Musk, Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, and Aristotle, out of order because Aristotle's at the top and or is it Euclid? Sorry, Euclid at the bottom. Anyway, names that you know as being relatively innovative, right? Well, what's cool is they all used a physics-based concept called first principles reasoning to come up with their biggest breakthroughs. And so I think it's something that's worth thinking about. Elon Musk says, boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there. Most of our lives we reason by analogy, meaning that we look at the maze and we say, oh, well, every other time that I've seen a maze, this is how it's been solved. And that only allows us to get slight variations on what we do. One thing that's interesting about how he's approached manufacturing is that his manufacturing facility for Tesla cars outputs cars, one 15.3 foot car an hour, which works out to 1 inch per second, which works out to the pace of a snail. And he said there has to be a better way to do it than that. And so the goal is to actually get the cars coming out at 4 times faster pace, which he said ultimately I want the cars coming out at a running pace. And there's no reason to not make that happen. But the assumption in the auto manufacturing world is that all of the things are built the same. And if you're going to order a manufacturing line, then you order it from all the people who make the manufacturing line run at the same rate. Is that how it really has to be? And they've got ridiculous robotics now in their battery factories on floors where there's only a few people who have access to the floor, and it's one of their most secret proprietary things is how do they do that? As a matter of fact, just thinking about cars. When he went to think about manufacturing cars, he said, if I'm going to be the biggest manufacturer of electronic cars, my competitive advantage is not going to be being a manufacturer of cars. And they consider themselves a tech company. If you've ever had anything wrong with your Tesla and you go back and you say, my seatbelt doesn't work, the people are very kind and they say, sorry, we're actually a tech company. I'm not kidding. So their customer service, that could be worked on. But what they decided to do was to be the best at batteries. And so all of their focus has been into batteries. And if you look at why they will ultimately, I think, eat the world in that as well, is that they focused on batteries. So let's look at what are the 3 steps to first principles reasoning. The first is identify and define. So identify and define your current assumptions. How many times do we actually think about our assumptions? When we're looking at a problem and we say, and the maze I'll continue to use as an example, it's, I assume I have to go through this. I assume I have to do it with a pen. I assume a whole bunch of things. If you will look at all the problems that you're facing in your business and all the challenges and all the objectives that you've got right now, not just the challenges, but the things that you want to accomplish, then I think you make a list of all those assumptions to start with. Then, and these are 2. This is just Jerry. I said he was in my deck. So Jerry said, I want to have a fund to acquire luxury real estate. And there's another guy that we recently talked to at a thing Jerry and I were at who had the idea of taking baseball bats that were being discarded and thrown away by schools and professional baseball teams, because I guess they go through them and then they're not good. I didn't actually know that a baseball bat wouldn't last forever, but apparently they don't. And they were just going to burn them. And so he said, I wonder if I took them and cut them up and turned it into a cup, if I could make something. And so he's built I think a $3.5 or $4 million business out of chopping up baseball bats, hollowing them out, and then turning them into mugs that he sells. Now he's in I think 60 Major League Baseball stadiums, right? But his cost to do that, they're called dugout mugs, and the cost to do that is $13.50. So break down the problem into its fundamental principles. That's step 2. So a couple of things to think about. It's important to view knowledge as a semantic tree. Be sure that you understand the fundamental principles, the trunk and the big branches before you get to the leaves, or there's nothing for them to hang on to. And for Jerry, to me, is ownership actually required to achieve the core objective? Is a fund required to own the properties that he wants to rent out? Because we know, and you're renting them out on Airbnb, that's the strategy, right?
VRBO, Airbnb.
Yeah, because we know that VRBO and Airbnb built their entire businesses without owning a single property, right? So why do you have to own properties to do that? Why not maybe think of a different way to do that? So rather than having to raise fund, which has all kinds of liabilities and challenges and brings other people in, is there another way to do that? Same thing with anything that's a physical product that you're manufacturing. It's what is the commoditized cost for each of the components? So what's the commoditized cost of wood, burn, because he burns logos into these things, and the labor to make one of these cups that cost $13.50 with all those things in it. Then create new solutions. So Elon is a great example of that with Tesla. He said cheaper, higher capacity batteries. So when he started, the kilowatt hour price of a battery was $600. It is currently $80, and he wants to get it down to 80 cents. SpaceX, hey, what if we reuse those rockets that cost tens of millions of dollars and just save some money there? That's freaking basic, right? But it was the revolutionary innovation that literally the rocket scientists at NASA could not think of, because they were stuck in, this is how it's always been done. And then PayPal, what if you can make payments by email? So I think he's a great person to look at for that. So for Jerry, I said, what if you just had an existing fund partner? What if you got somebody else that's got a fund that's already doing it? Because there's a ton of money that people have raised that's just sitting on the sidelines right now, and they need to deploy the cash, or they have to give it back, and they don't want to give it back because they get what's called a carry, meaning for every dollar that's invested, they typically get somewhere between 2 and 3% of that. And then to save the time, cost, and liability, or get a bank or broker partner that's already got an inventory of dead luxury properties, because we know there's tons of REOs, and we know there's tons of REOs that they don't want to move right now because they don't want to depress the market in particular markets. What if you just go to them and say, hey, I can help you monetize that and cut a multi-year contract with them, or something like that, right? Turn their dead inventory into a profit center. And for Chris, what if you actually don't use bats, right? Because he's all caught up in the concept of using the bat, but there's all kinds of wood that doesn't look like bats. What if we actually just take wood and we go to another place and we source the wood, the manufacturing labor overseas, and we figured out we could cut the cost to about $1.35 from $13.50, right? So it's that kind of thinking that will really have a huge impact on your business.